Hello, world. I hope all is well and all is right. It's another beautiful night. Tonight, we're joined by an Indiana based author and artist. He's a former stand up comedian. He spent 37 years in Jehovah's Witness before making a break for it. His work is heavily influenced by the macabre and his history of covert writing while he was still in the faith. He is essentially the Indiana Jones of religious cult destruction, but instead of using a whip, he uses beautiful words to tell horrible stories. He's currently working on a children's book and a horror romance titled 1111, and he is also the author of Mentally Diseased. Mr. Micah Losh.
Hi, thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a good day.
Been a good day?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. It's warming up down here where I'm at in Kentucky.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty rainy down here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually it kind of was cloudy today. Not much rain, but it's that time of year. Spring's coming and
Yeah.
it's getting a little warmer. April showers, spring May flowers and all that good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, thanks for having me on. I guess, do you have any questions for me, or do you want me to just kind of speak about my experience?
I do have a lot of questions for you, but before we get to that, I just want to say for those of you that are watching, uh, Micah is an author and he's an artist, and it says that I've read that you got some experience in stand up, and I know that you're doing some activism and stuff, but a lot of it comes from your time with the Jehovah Witness, and you spent 37 years of your life with the Jehovah Witness, and there was a turning point in your life. There was a point of impact, so to say, and you realized that maybe maybe something just wasn't right.
Yeah.
I don't really know a whole lot about the Jehovah Witness, but I'll let you explain kind of your story and kind of what happened with you. That way, if there's anybody else out there that's being influenced by groups or religious cults or anything like that, that maybe they'll be able to pick up on some warning signs or just be able to relate to you so they don't feel so alone. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I was born into Jehovah's Witnesses in 1982. My parents joined in the late 70s, I believe. Um, we were the only part of both sides of the family, and uh, now while they have changed some more recently, they're always changing their rules and moving the goalposts. You really weren't allowed to be close to your family if they weren't Jehovah's Witnesses, because Armageddon was coming, and if you weren't loyal, God would kill you. And I was instructed to pray every night for my God to bring destruction to his enemies. And what that meant was pretty much killing everyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness. Um,
Wow.
it was hindsight is 2020, but a lot of times people ask me what it's like to grow up in a cult. And Jehovah's Witnesses are a doomsday cult. It fits the bite model. They are an extremely high control group. I would say it was mundane and horrifying, because you're constantly, every day, everything. If you curse, if you watch a movie you shouldn't have, Armageddon's right around the corner. So if it's the next morning, well, you failed, so maybe Jehovah will kill you. Um,
So
I
you're saying if you watched the movie maybe the night before and
yeah,
you didn't, is there like a with the Christians you kind of ask forgiveness for your sins,
well,
and ask to be forgiven, repent. Do you have that in Jehovah Witness?
so a lot of Christians, are saved. But Jehovah's Witnesses, you're required to be baptized. When I was a child, there was church 3 times a week. You had to prepare for church. You had to make an answer. You had to sing. You had to visibly and audibly be singing. Um, You had to dress in a way that reflected positive on your God. You basically perfection is demanded, which is impossible, right? So everything crap is you, and everything good is from Jehovah. And for a child, that's really frightening. Jehovah's Witnesses do shun. They used to call it disfellowshipping. I believe now they say just so and so is no longer a Jehovah's Witness. But when I was a child, I was worried, maybe I'd do something and I'd be shunned by my parents. I know teenagers who've been evicted to be homeless by their parents. I think that, well, I can get into that, but when I went to school, I was told you don't stand for the pledge, you don't participate in any holidays, I never had birthdays. I couldn't even eat a piece of cake. And not only that, when I went to school, that was my territory. So if people were doing those things and I did not act to save them, that was a sin of omission. So Jehovah would kill them and I would be blood guilty and killed as well. And of course, you're kept in a cycle of fear, because when you're thinking is fear-based, it's circular, survival-oriented, and you're kept so busy and feeling so much guilt that you don't really have time to stop and think. At least I didn't. And so that was my life. I had the congregation and my parents, and now I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Jehovah's Witnesses are not allowed to take blood transfusions. And when I was 12, my father was diagnosed with a kidney disease, IgA nephropathy, and kidney cancer. And now, growing up, I had heard people say, I lost my car keys, but I prayed to Jehovah and he helped me, stupid things like that. So I really thought, well, Jehovah will save my father. I need my father. I'm not going to be, that would be horrific. So I prayed very diligently. The chemo was very aggressive, and the doctors offered him blood. They said it might not help, but it would at least be making an effort.
There's a possibility.
Yeah. And of course, my father refused and died loyal to Jehovah. Now, at my father's funeral, I was told I should be proud of him. And I was told that I was the man of the house. I needed to lead my mother. You're not allowed to be a devastated 13-year-old child, because, cult members nobody joins Jehovah's Witnesses when their life is going good. They're taught to witness or preach to people in graveyards, which even when I was in, I found that to be predatory. But you really have to be a walking, talking advertisement for the group. And after my father died, I just wasn't that. You
had your own stuff to worry about.
Yeah.
I mean, you're only 13.
Yeah, and I was given no compassion, no empathy. Jehovah's Witness funerals are more about trying to draw people in to the group. They barely talk about the person. My father's funeral was in a funeral home, which it wasn't forbidden, but it was rare. And yeah.
To be in a funeral home?
Yes. Most Jehovah's Witness funerals are in their churches, which they're called kingdom halls. So, yeah, I really, I was suffering, I connected with heavy metal. Of course, that was wrong. That was indicative of my sinful nature. I connected with Stephen King and Edgar Allan Poe. I didn't feel happy, and that's justified, but my mother, the elders, the church, they really began distancing themselves from me and treating me cruelly. I was told I needed to get over my father. I was told that my mother's loss was greater than mine. And of course, being a father now, and having distance from it, it's repugnant to me to think that a child would be treated that way. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses are instructed in the Bible to look after the widow and fatherless boy. But no one did. When I was 16, I was a stupid teenager and I was angry. And a friend of mine, after church one night, we went and hit mailboxes, which is dumb, if my son did that. But, you know,
You were a teenager. I
it,
mean, teenagers do
yes.
silly stuff sometimes. Yeah.
And I was a teenager whose father had died 3 years prior.
Right.
You know,
If that's the worst thing you did was knocking over a couple mailboxes, I
yeah,
think the world would be all right.
yeah. So I was arrested. Taken to juvenile, and we did a rehabilitation program, and we met with people we had victimized, and we all talked about that night, and they showed me compassion, and even two of them hugged us and told us we were good boys. Now, that never really resonated with me until the past few years, but people who I terrified them and destroyed their property forgave me. But the church, of course, didn't. They said if people refused Jehovah because I'd been arrested and died in Armageddon, yet again, I'd be blood guilty and die at Armageddon. So what they would do at the time is they would announce that so and so had been involved in wrongdoing but had been repentant, and then a few weeks later they would give a general talk about local needs. So it was about protecting our God's reputation, as if God needs me. um, so I was kind of in bad standing, and I never really got out of it. Um, I
When you say bad standing, what do you mean by that?
So there are kind of different tiers of shunning, right? So I wasn't shunned, but I wasn't in good standing. So I wasn't really someone that should be interacted with or, invited to do things because I wasn't spiritual enough. And
But you was also a kid, right? You were a teenager?
I'm 16, right? But kind
Right,
of my
right.
community receded from me even more. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses say they serve the happy God. So if you're not happy, that's indicative of something being wrong. So I received, like I said, very little compassion and empathy. And I began engaging in self harm. I became very suicidal. And I just, Jehovah's Witnesses believe when you die, it's like before you were born, there's just nothing. So I just wanted to die, and either I could be resurrected with my father, or I'd just be asleep. Either way, the pain would stop. So I also began writing after my father's death. The first poem I
Did
wrote,
that help you,
well,
the writing?
I was told not to speak about him. So I couldn't really deal with I couldn't journal because my mother would go through my room. But if I created art, I could deal with things, but it gave me enough distance. I could say, no, that's just a story. I also, in my 20s, I began making abstract art. I like to do abstract expressionist art because, I could make it about something if it was angry or whatever, and no, but I couldn't get in trouble because you're always worried about being judged and called into the back room. And if they don't like you, they'll say, oh, well, you have that shirt on and that offended someone. They'll really make your life hell and really, the most superficial, judgmental things. Um, so I began sharing some of my writing online. And I received positive feedback, a lot of that. And also, I started going into chat rooms and talking to people who were, as we would call them, worldly, not Jehovah's Witnesses. But I was talking about music. And I met this girl from New Zealand, and I wanted to go visit her. And we talked for years, probably from 18 to nearly 21. And she was really the only person who was nice to me. And I didn't want to be around Jehovah's Witnesses. And often I found them boring and just they weren't likable. But of
Well,
course,
you're thinking about like you said your interests had gone to like metal and music and things like that. You're talking to somebody from New Zealand.
yeah,
I mean, the things that you guys are talking about, you're probably not even able to even touch the surface on any of that stuff with
yeah,
Jehovah Witness people, right?
Yeah,
And that's your whole community? Is that all your neighbors, your family,
um,
everybody is pretty much Jehovah Witness? Is that
well,
correct? Or
so they I think that last I checked, there are about 8,000 or 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide. That's what they claim. So you're only allowed to be friends with people in the organization. You can't have friends outside of it. And friendship is compulsory. But of course, I was not liked. I was not in good standing. So, I would have bits where I would find somebody to hang out with. But honestly, what I did was just find the least crappy people I could. Um,
right.
you know, um, but everyone outside of the group who was nice to me, I would reject. But not this girl. Um, Maybe it's because she was the first person to compliment my writing and it meant so much to me. But we had this amazing connection too. We would talk for hours and she was cool, she was pretty, she was into all the stuff I liked. But not long before I turned 21, my mother found out about this and told me, I needed to reject her because my father would want to see me after Armageddon in paradise when he's resurrected on earth. So I told her I couldn't talk to her anymore, and I overdosed on sleeping pills. And
From depression?
yeah, and
So let me ask you this.
yeah,
You said that your mother said that your dad would want to see you again in heaven, I assume. Do
or
you guys call it heaven? Or
no,
did,
no.
did do the Jehovah Witness call it heaven?
So they believe only 144,000 people go to heaven to rule with Christ. They believe after Armageddon, there will be a resurrection of the righteous and the unrighteous. God will judge them on their heart condition. They will be resurrected to live forever on earth and be perfect and young. And all animals will be peaceable.
So only 144,000 actually make it to heaven.
Yes, that's.
Uh, do they say how those 144,000 are chosen to get to heaven?
I mean, they change things all the time. A lot of them are like Moses, Abraham, people from the Bible. They say there are people who are anointed. But they say Armageddon will come before that number dwindles. But that was when I was a child. It's gone on so long that they've had to rearrange their whole theology, and it's very convoluted. Um,
Are there things that you can do inside the Jehovah Witness to like elevate your standard or your status in the group?
well, if you're spiritual, if you answer at meetings, if you go and preach, if you dress, in boring colors like khaki, yes, but I did not want to do those things.
Right.
I would say I was more liberal minded in the group, but yeah, because I just thought that was superficial. Usually when I would meet people with piercings and tattoos, they would be nicer to me than the church people. So
They would be themselves.
yeah, and they, so I always gravitated towards that. And of course, like you were supposed to have a four-door car for preaching. I like muscle cars, so I would get Mustangs. In my 20s I got tattoos and stuff, but yeah, after so I wound up in a coma, um, and I woke up tied to a bed with a ventilator, and yeah, and then I came out of it, and people treated me even worse. People stopped acknowledging me. I would see them, and say, "Hey, whatever," and I would know they heard me. And of course, when I would,
Was that during COVID when you said you woke up
no, no,
to a ventilator?
this was
That was a suicide attempt.
well, it wasn't during COVID. This was when I was 21, um,
Okay.
and so I went back, and yeah, I seem to exist even less in the group. And that was just kind of how I stayed. When I was 23, I was disfellowshipped, so I was shunned for a year and a few months, maybe. I don't remember at this point. And then,
You said disfellowshipped. Is that like an official thing that's like actually on paper, or is that just something that's kind of like everybody knows, but it's unspoken?
No, it was announced and nobody was allowed to speak to me.
Okay.
If you live with family, they can speak to you, but not about religious matters. But to be honest, I was not, I really didn't exist in the group, so being shunned really didn't make a difference, right? So I got reinstated at 24 or 23, maybe I don't remember. Well, no, it was a year, so it would have been 24. And I stayed in the group. When I was jumping ahead to when I was 33. I just lived this miserable existence. I kept writing, I created art. At one point, when I was shunned the first time, that was when I tried stand up comedy. A friend of mine with a band, he invited me to host an event, and that was really fun, and I had a good response. Even someone offered to help me tour with the bands, but I couldn't do that because that was associating with worldly people, and I had to do better spiritually to get reinstated. So yet again, I cut off people who were encouraging and cool. Just uh, to go back.
Anybody that thought for themselves, that had their own thoughts and their own things going on, and
Mhm.
that weren't part
Yeah,
of a group or a part of Jehovah Witness. Anybody outside of that group was pretty much considered an enemy to what
yeah,
they
uh,
were trying to build and teach.
yeah. Bad association, and uh, so yeah, jumping ahead to well, and also I wanted my father back. I just was focused on him, and when I was 33, a woman I worked with started coming to the Kingdom Hall. Now the congregation really liked her, but of course they didn't like me, and we were interested in each other, but they forbid it. And so I wound up being shunned for her for a second time in my life. And it was not a good marriage, but of course you cannot get divorced unless your partner commits immorality, cheats on you. So we ended up, I moved in with her, we eloped, and I had hoped we would tell her family and maybe I'd like get to experience having a family. But I still have never really been given a reason why. She refused to tell her parents. She said it made her nervous. I don't know. And she never told them. Over a year into our marriage, my stepson let it slip. But I had been drunk every day for since then. It just, I had no community. I had no one. I'm falling out of love with this woman. So I thought I'm just going to drink myself to death, right? And she wound up
Do
getting,
you think the drinking had something to do with her not wanting to introduce you to the parents?
no, 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 because they told her not to join Jehovah's Witnesses. My former mother-in-law was very intrusive. Like she would come into the house and go through the trash. So it was a very dysfunctional environment. I mean, because I drank, but when that happened, I was just like, oh, if you're not going to tell your parents, I'm going to be blackout drunk every day. So, in my mind, when I'd been promised this would happen, I just was, I was livid, and so yeah.
And then your ex-wife, you guys got married, correct?
Mhm.
And she did not grow up in the way that you did,
No, no,
right?
we worked together, and she asked me about it and started attending meetings. So, you know, uh, yeah, yeah, so, I have a son, and then COVID happens. Now, my whole life, I've been told, plagues, famines, wars, reports of wars. COVID is Armageddon, like unequivocally. I'm like, oh, this is it, right? But also, I'm just, I'm drinking insane amounts of alcohol. Um,
Even during COVID.
Oh yeah, because I worked in a nursing
Yeah.
home and she worked in a hospital, so we were both essential. So extremely stressful. Um, and I'm also just because when COVID happened, we weren't going to meetings. We could go on Zoom meetings, but my whole life I'd heard, we'll never stop preaching door to door. Well, the preaching work stopped too, and all of these things, I don't know. It seemed, my brain started firing in a different way. And now I started researching Jehovah's Witnesses online, but I was told anything negative about us is from Satan, and if you look at it, it will warp your mind with demonic influence. So I had to get even more drunk to even read it because I felt so guilty, and I didn't know what was happening really. I think I was losing my mind perhaps, and
We're trying to find it, one or the other.
yeah, it was just I felt like I was free falling and just trying to grab something, right? And I can't tell my wife I'm questioning because I'm the spiritual head. If I'm not good enough, God will kill her and my son. And
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
yeah,
If you're not good enough,
because I'm the,
God will
I'm the
kill you.
man, right? So it says the husband is the head of the wife, just as Christ is the head of the congregation. I don't know the scripture, but there's a scripture that says that. So if you're the husband, you're in charge of your family's spiritual welfare. So basically, you know the truth. You can prevent Armageddon. So it's just like killing them because you're lazy, not good enough, not spiritual enough, and so then I wake up in jail. And that was, culture shock. And
How long you spend there?
I was in jail 77 days. Now this,
Okay, so that's 2.5 months.
yeah, so, you know, I, now I never had withdrawals. I never like had shakes. I just like to drink, I always had drank, a lot, had strong drinks. So I didn't experience DTs or anything. But my
And Jehovah Witness, they drink,
So
correct?
they are allowed to drink, but they're not supposed to get drunk. Which getting drunk is the point of drinking. So it's kind of stupid. It's like you're supposed to moderate yourself and not offend, but binge drinking is rampant because you're allowed to drink and you're allowed to eat. So also morbid obesity is pretty common in the organization because you really can't do much, right? Um,
Eating and drinking's two big things that people do because they really can't do.
yeah.
There's not a lot of hobbies to choose from, so
Well,
I
I mean,
guess
you're supposed to barely work so you can give all your time and money to Jehovah. You can do what your hobbies in paradise. You're supposed to spend all this time studying and praying and meditating and preaching. You really don't have time, and you can't watch our movies. You're not supposed to watch TV shows. At least when I was in, you weren't supposed to watch shows with gay people in it. You weren't supposed to watch shows with people having premarital sex because they would say that was like associating with worldly people. It's a very one-dimensional, way of living. And they say they're proud to say we're no part of the world. You can't vote. You can't have political opinions.
you, as a Jehovah Witness, you couldn't vote.
No, because no, that's
What about like multiracial families or
no,
relationships and stuff like
that's
that?
fine. They do have a
That's fine.
Yeah, they do have a history of racism. But yeah, there's nothing like that. Um, at least not in my experience. I mean, there are congregations all over the world. And I have found that kind of, even though they say they're all the same, that's really not true. But so I'm in jail, right? And I'm, I'm, I, I'm just devastated. Like I didn't, I'm like, how is this who I am? Like, you know, and
Like, what do you mean? You're questioning your identity?
well, no,
Like you don't know if this is who you really are? You think you're really someone else, or
no, no. Well, what I mean is, I don't know if I'm in a cult or not, and I'm in jail. I can't research anything. I can't talk to anyone who's knowledgeable about it, and I sound insane. If I'm sitting there saying,
so? What are the guys like asking you questions, and then you don't really know how to answer those questions, and then you
no, no.
start questioning yourself, or what makes you like come to the conclusion that you might be in a cult?
Well, because I was already questioning that. And then I wake up in
Okay.
jail and I'm not drunk. My mind is clearing up. Um, all I have is time, you know. I mean, I would, you know, draw and cartoons for my son to mail to him. And I'm still speaking to my ex-wife, you know. Um, but I can't research anything, and there, you know, I just can't talk about it. So I wrote my mother a letter, and I asked her. I said, "Look, I've been drunk a long time, and I thought maybe I needed to go to treatment." And my mother filed a no contact order against me. I got called out of the block. It was during COVID, you know, so it was virtual court. But my mother, you know, mentioned that when I was 18, I told her that I wanted to point a fake gun at a cop so one would shoot me. And of course, she brought that up when I'm 37 and in jail. That I have, you know, suicide by cop and I'm this, you know, horrible monster. So at this point, my ex-wife is still involved in this group, and my mother, I know that she's doing this to try and erase me from my son's life. So I had a public defender who threw me under the bus, pretty much, but when I'm in court, I have a plea bargain, and I realize if I sign it, I'll be homeless. But I have to get out to protect my son, right?
You'll be homeless, but you won't be in jail any longer.
Yeah. So I signed the plea bargain, and honestly, we lived maybe a 5-10 minute walk from the jail. So I lost 14 pounds in 77 days, even with commissary. And I run home, and I learn my car has been repossessed. So I'm trying to think where I can live outside to be close to my son, right? Because he has to have it better than me. It's just, you know, I never wanted a child because I was afraid I would die on them like my father did me. It was so devastating and so isolating. So at one point, I crawled under a bridge to see if I could live under there. And I had about $60 in my wallet. Everyone I know who knows I'm homeless is like, doesn't answer my calls or says, sorry. No one will even let me sleep inside one night. No one will give me a ride to get
Not a shower, not nothing.
no. So I was allowed. I slept inside. You know, I slept in my ex-wife's car one of those nights, and then
And these are people in the Jehovah Witness. You had been getting shunned by them for a while, right? So that is
well,
one reason that they won't mess with you.
yes. So well,
And then any
I had had an outburst at an elder on the phone prior to being locked up. Who he years ago he had mocked me for being suicidal, and I had tried to reconcile that with him. And then he told my mother that I said I was going to kill the entire congregation, and I told her, I said, well, that's ignorant. If I wanted to kill them, why would I tell them? And she said, that's great, and hung up on me. So it was a series of things where just, you know, I didn't have coping skills. So when these things would happen, I'm just drinking more and more, you know, to the point I'm waking up drunk. You know, just, and I was disassociating a lot. So I crawl under this bridge, right? And I'm thinking, where can I sleep where bugs will bite me the least? And there's just huge cobwebs. And I don't know that I've ever felt fear that big. Because I was like, I could, it was getting cold and dark. I'm like,
yeah, and you actually have to close your eyes and go to sleep under that bridge.
yeah. And I thought for a minute, I thought about my money, and I was near a liquor store, and I was like, dude, I don't want to feel this. I should go buy it. And then I thought, no, I promised Silas I would never drink again. And I didn't know what to do. You know, it was COVID. So there were a few places I could call, but nobody took single males. You know, they had shelters for women, or you had to have kids. And
If you were a single male, you were at the end of the list.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm looking, you know, I'm like seeing options. Nope, nope. And I'm like, I don't, you know, it was just, it was terrifying and overwhelming. And especially, I'm going to be, you know, with my son. So I wind up calling a halfway house. And they said I could come down there and talk to them. So I packed my luggage, and my ex-wife drove me down there. And I told her, if I don't get in here, I'm going to have to go to the homeless shelter, which I probably would have been robbed and attacked because I had matching luggage, And I, so I get into the halfway house, right? And then I'm given, books for AA, and they're like, you have to follow the rules. You have to clean up after yourself. That's fine. That's no issue. But then, like, some of the behavior there was really ridiculous to me. Like, one time they had this house meeting and said, "Don't have sex with women out by the dumpster." And I'm just like, yeah, let's put that on a list of things I'd never do. Like, my priority is getting back to my son. And then people are telling me that I'm going to relapse, that I'm planning a relapse, all these things. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses are told you can't trust your heart because it's treacherous, but you're told to avoid independent thinking. So all you know is obedience. If you're not obedient, you deserve death. And so, they keep telling me things that aren't true. And I can own my sins, I can own my mistakes. But they're talking about, stealing packages off porches, committing theft, pimping out their girlfriends, things I've never done, and things I genuinely don't think I'm at a risk for, And it was so homogenized. But I was given the AA literature, and I read it multiple times because, I'm being told this is life or death. And I'm told if I leave, it's jails, institutions, or death, which honestly kind of, I don't know. There were just a lot of things in that environment that kind of reminded me of being a Jehovah's Witness,
Well, the structure of it all, I
Yeah.
guess, probably reminded you of that. And then, there's 12 traditions, 12 steps. They got their rules and
Yeah.
their quirks and ways, and each individual, like, 12-step program's a little different than the other, but they're all kind of like got their old timers, and
Yeah.
I could see how it could definitely
Yeah.
remind you of that.
And,
Yes.
and I'm not saying the two groups are identical, but AA really reminds me of this, right? And then, like, they're talking about God and the devil and praying, and the chapter to the atheist just says why you must acknowledge there's a creator. Well, I really am questioning because all I've done is be obedient to God. If I applied for a job, I prayed before and after, probably during. Everything was this religion. And I'm being told that my best thinking got me to AA and that I need to rely on a higher power. Now, I will tell you, I'm extremely determined. When I was 18, I began binge eating after my father's death. I got to be 300 pounds. I lost over 100 pounds. I walked 4 miles a day for years. I knew, I know who I am. And it really angered me. I refused to pray, and I refused to pick a higher power. And the more I did that, the more I was told I wanted people to relapse. Absolutely not. But I'm not going to, I really need to figure things out. So after a month there, you're given access to technology. So then I'm online researching Jehovah's Witnesses, right? And they're telling me I need to come and associate with people and just leave me alone. I really am trying to figure this out. I'm not trying to get drunk or high. I had never done drugs, I was just allowed to drink, so I did. And it was really, really frustrating. And even at one point, now AA will say,
Did you ever drink with friends, or you always drank alone?
I mean, sometimes, but I really didn't have that many friends, right? Because I wasn't in good standing. I had tattoos. I was always kind of rebellious. And, like, I didn't miss being drunk. I hated AA meetings. I mean, I'm like, oh my God, just get me out of here, because everyone's talking about they're gracious to their God, and it's just making my flesh crawl. And it's not that I wish them harm, but it just makes me physically ill, right? Because my father martyred himself for his belief. So you can believe whatever, but I need evidence, because I've suffered immeasurably because of faith. And I will not proclaim my faith in anything unless I see evidence. And I was really, really mistreated, but whatever. I also, I would mock them and argue. And so at one point I said, I genuinely don't know if I've been in a cult or if Satan has control of my mind. But I went to therapy. And when I'm telling them about, my mother and my marriage and my community, my first therapist, she said, you were abused, right? And I was like, oh, well, was I? I didn't know. It's like coming out of the Matrix. And she died.
What kind of abuse was she suggesting?
Physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse.
Emotional,
Yeah,
everything but sexual.
Yes. So she gave me a workbook on chronic PTSD, and it was like it had been written about me. I mean, just everything. I was like, oh, wow. Like, and then I start learning about things like confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance, and I recognize those things in me. And I recognize how, when I would speak, I would say, well, all people this, I would speak in generalities and absolutes. And really, the last fragments of myself, it was just like I ceased to be. I lost my community, my identity, my marriage, my home, my vehicle. I had, and then my ex-wife files for divorce. So she told me she didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, which that was a blessing. I didn't have to worry about that. But yeah, we ended up getting divorced. And I have shared custody of my son, but I had no vehicle. I lived 45 minutes away from him, and I lived in an unplaced safe where, I was angry when people are doing heroin and acid in the bathroom because I refused to bring my son around that. And people in that halfway house told me I was judgmental, and, I would curse them out. Practicing judgment is not being judgmental. It's not my fault they don't know the definition of words. I really was, pushing back, but I wasn't really breaking any rules. I was just calling out things that I thought to not be true. So I get kicked out of there, right? Because I wanted an atheist sponsor, because my first two sponsors relapsed. I didn't relapse, but
They didn't know what to think about the atheist stuff, did they?
they couldn't handle it, and I know the Bible very well. And so when they, I would.
But it was throwing them for a loop, just the word atheist alone, and saying that you were against religion and
Well,
third.
I'm not against
Um,
it. I think it causes a lot of harm, but
you think what causes a lot of harm?
well,
Religion,
religion,
like a certain religion, or all religion in the whole world, or
well, I mean,
what do you mean?
I don't know that my opinion is that important, but I know that pedophilia is rampant in a lot of different churches. You have purity culture. There's misogyny. There can be sex or racism. Like the Crusades. The Inquisition. Or people. 9/11. You have extremists in these religions who do terrible things, and for me, it's not about even. It's just I'm not going to accept something that I can't know for sure, and I can tell you why. The night my son was born, he had respiratory issues, and they flew him to Riley Hospital. And that my mother drove me to the hospital, and she told me, if he needs blood, you know what you need to do. I needed to let him die. Now it didn't come to that; it was a respiratory issue.
Did you even question that?
No,
I mean, is that something that you actually had to sit there and question? Like, if I give my son blood, I'll be wrong, or
but not that. See, it would their in their viewpoint, it's killing him because he could live forever on Earth in paradise if he's just loyal. So I agonized over it. Thankfully, it didn't come up. But the only thing I knew to do was I called my ex-wife because I knew she would flip out, And she hung up on me, and I just said, I'm not going to do anything without talking to her. But it was a cowardly move. Um, Now, I can't tell you for certain that I would have denied him blood. But even my first thought when I looked at my child was, if he's gay, I can't love him. Now, I suffered a lot, but the fact that I could have potentially let my child die, no, 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 no. I need evidence. I need proof. I will not accept that. I simply refuse. It's cost me too much. It's not about I'm unwilling to believe. I just need to, I just, if I can't, I'm fine saying I don't know, you know. And of course, people didn't like that. They're telling me they have a good God and God's doing all these things, and whatever. That's fine, but I don't believe it. So
Well, your experience has been a little different.
yes, definitely.
And can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So with Jehovah Witness, um, is there ever like an individual walk, or is everything done as a group? Like,
Uh,
do you have to give like progress reports, or do you have to
oh no.
allow the group access to your relationship with God, or can somebody just kind of like go to church and pray and have a relationship with their higher power, and that just be
I mean,
enough?
well, they say faith without works is dead. So you need to be in. Well, at the time, because they've relaxed some rules, you needed to be in dress clothes. Women couldn't wear pants. Now they can. You need to be preaching. You need to be turning in your time. You need to sit there with your materials highlighted. You need to be singing where people can see and hear you. It's very performative, and Jehovah's Witnesses are extremely fake people. You know, I work in a bar.
So what happens when they're not in church and there's no performance, there's no songs or singing,
I
and the
mean,
church doors are closed? I've realized like that you got a certain, so many people that are always going to play the game.
yeah.
There's like they're kind of like a team, so to speak, of like starting five or starting 10 that's always going to like have the face on for the franchise, and give the best. But like just what about like your neighbors, or you never had any outside influences growing up? Because you said you didn't live like on a compound or anything. You lived in a regular neighborhood with other kids.
Yeah, I was
Um,
I
you,
I was not allowed to have friends outside of Jehovah's Witnesses. I was not. I
okay.
could talk to people, but if a Jehovah's Witness is talking to you, more than likely they're trying to convert you. That there's always an agenda. That's always the subtext. And I was terrified. I was terrified of God as a child. I was hit in the face. I was slapped. If I didn't answer at meetings as a little boy, my arms and legs were pinched by my mother. Um, Now you have people. I mean, like I said, I got arrested for hitting mailboxes. I got tattoos. I was kind of the nail that stuck out. So they're always trying to hammer me down. But it's also, if they don't like you, I mean, it's just, I can only speak of my own experience, but yeah, I mean, basically, everybody hated me, so I just stayed to myself and just focused on getting my father back. I didn't like the people, I didn't want to be around them, um, so I just kind of focused on myself. The
And when you say focus on getting your father back,
In the
that's
resurrection, after
yes.
Armageddon, if I'm loyal, I'll get to see my dead father again. So, that was my focus, really from 13 to 37. Um, it was just I wanted my dad back. Everything was so bad that, it just, I mean, it was just decades of crap, really. Not to say I never had fun, not to say I never did cool things, but the majority of it is just trying to fit in a place where you don't belong. And
Were there older people in your family, like aunts, uncles, and other people that were saying like, now you better do this or you better do that because you're going to want to see your dad, like
no,
kind of like
none of
encouraging you to be one way or another?
Well, no one in my family was a Jehovah's Witness, just my parents. We really cut off
Okay.
the family. Now, of
Yeah.
course,
So that kind of isolated you guys
yeah.
from the rest of
The,
them
the
then,
only
didn't it?
community you're allowed to have is Jehovah's Witnesses. You're only
Yeah.
allowed to associate with people that will reinforce your belief. Anyone that challenges it must be disavowed because that's Satan, you know. Um, of course, everyone did. I'm told to be proud. My father died loyal. I'm told I'm the spiritual head. My mother would complain that I wasn't studying with her and being the spiritual leader for the house. And my mother is a horrible human being, an absolute failure as a parent. She really went out of her way, whether or not she knew it, to just cripple me and just like keep me with her. Like there were brief periods when I didn't live with her, but I'm always in debt. She would call the police on me if I was suicidal, have me arrested or handcuffed and taken to like a stress center for a 3-day hold. Um, I mean, that was my life for decades. It was just that. It was work, church, and, trying to find some time to get away from these people.
How old was your mother when she became a Jehovah Witness?
I don't know. They would have joined in the late 70s. So,
Her and your father joined at the same time,
yeah, they were
right
married
before you were born, a couple
probably
years.
late late 20s to early 30s. They both came from severe abuse and trauma and really horrible environments. So
And do the Jehovah Witness try to seek out people like that? Like, do they go to like abuse shelters and
no,
like,
not shelters, but like I said, they are taught to preach in graveyards. Um, my mother will strike up conversations with cashiers, with waiters, with people at tables. It's anywhere because every opportunity that you have that you don't act on, you're blood guilty. So yeah, it's strange to think about existing that way and how miserable it is. Um, and but like I said, I started painting. I kept writing all that time, and my mother told me to throw away my writing. Um, yeah,
did you go to public school?
yeah. Some are house or homeschooled, but most aren't because yet again, that's opportunity to preach to other kids, right? Basically, you're
Oh
taught.
yeah, you said that was your territory.
Yeah, you're taught when someone goes through something terrible, they might be willing to listen. And that was one of the things people said in AA. They said, "Well, I stopped drinking in AA," which is not compelling to me. I know people that became Jehovah's Witnesses and stopped doing drugs. That's not like evidence of anything divine to me. Nobody really joins those groups when their life is going good, and so for me, I just was never in control of my own life. Everything, everything was about God. Everything is about, will I offend these people by what I eat, by what I drink, by what I wear, by what I say? It's just a.
But you're saying, "Will I offend these people?" You're not asking yourself, "Will I offend God? Will I offend, my higher power?"
Oh
Or
no,
will
no, you had.
you're more worried about offending them than you were like the actual,
Oh no,
like
no, absolutely not. The main fear was God. God can read your mind. God knows everything. So, like I said, if you drop something and curse, and Armageddon's tomorrow, you might die. So the everything is fear based. Everything is you get called into a back room and then you're shunned or you're reproved. And for me, it was just decades of you wore all black that offended someone. You wore a shirt with a skull on it. You listened to Ozzy Osbourne. They really nitpick the people they don't like, which I imagine is to make them leave or make them change. But yeah, so I get evicted into this other halfway house. The tiny room I moved into, there was hardened vomit all over the floor. I was robbed while I was there. Um, Another horrible environment. I refused to have my son in, right? So, a bar was opening at the end of COVID, and they offered me more money than I'd ever made in my life. And so I was on probation. I called my probation officer. He said it was okay. My ex-wife, I wanted to let her know what I was doing, at the time. And I said, are you okay with that? She said, fine. So I started working there. Now, I was told not to work at a bar, asked if I'm planning a relapse, all of this projection and crap when like my focus is I had $35,000 in debt and I wanted to get out of where I was. So eventually, I was allowed to move into like a sober living community after you've gone through a halfway house. And I got, a tiny little room and a bathroom and a key. And I had space and it was closer to my job because I'm still walking everywhere. So that was when I had time to myself. And on my laptop, I had found 20 years of writing. And as I'm reading it, it's really becoming clear to me that like I was dealing with things, and some of it's just fiction, but I kind of began remembering who I had been, who I had repressed. And so, yet again, when I said I wanted to publish a book, I'm told not to, all this crap. And now at the time, because I kind of planned, like, well, maybe after I publish this, I'll just kill myself. Because at least my son can know why I'm not here, right? And I did kind of worry, because, well, what if they try and, people that are around him try and turn him against me?
Someone else take credit for it.
Well, yeah, but I wanted to own my sins because, after I learned about PTSD, I was told, or chronic PTSD, I was told, I had religious trauma. I went to 3 or 4 therapists. I did EMDR light therapy, and all of them told me like, well, you're not drinking, you're paying off your bills, you want to write a book, you're doing great. But in AA, I'm told I need to have a sponsor. I need to be a sponsor. I need to do service work. I don't want to do that. My whole life has been service. I'm not trying to do, I just want to exist. And of course, that they just never could hear me. And so I had a literary agent, and then her business partner died, and she ended up ghosting me, which is fine. I'm not angry or anything, but I had already made up my mind I was gonna publish a book. I didn't know how, but I was like, because I'd always wanted to do that, right? So I hired a lawyer because I wanted to, I didn't want to be sued for telling my story. And I hired an editor who was really passionate. We had a great working environment. I hired another ex-Jehovah's Witness to paint the cover. And I published Mentally Diseased on my 40th birthday, which was a way of really reclaiming that. And it's called Mentally Diseased because that's what Jehovah's Witnesses say about former members. They are mentally diseased. And
People that try to leave Jehovah Witness, that's
yeah,
what they call them.
yes,
Yeah.
among other things. But I wanted to disempower that, and I thought, you killed my father. I was so broken. I messed up my life, and I've lost time with my son. Um, Anytime that term came up online, I wanted to be found. It was a middle finger to this group, and but I figured I'll do this and then I can die, right? My life is a ridiculous, horrible existence. Over a year, I didn't even see my son once or twice, I think, because I didn't have transportation. Once he started school, I had no support. I would call him each week, but it was a horrific year. Really, really painful. But I published that book, right? And it was crazy because that night someone messaged me and they said, "Hey, I read your whole book," and I just told them because I was in a dark place. I said, "Yeah, I think I'm just gonna kill myself now." And she said, "No, no, no. That like would you know she said a lot of people have suffered and that would demean the whole message." And I was like, "Well, I don't know that I really have a message." But and then a friend of mine online, he told me, and I give all the credit to him, but he said when he read my book, he looked at himself and he quit drinking. And I was like, wow, like that's improved his
That's pretty powerful.
that's improved his life and his family's life. And
Yes.
it wasn't about my ego. What was so gratifying was after my father died, all I had was art, my books, my albums, movies I watched. That was all I had. And I was like, wow, like I've created art now that people have, and people started messaging me and saying they liked my writing, or some people said, wow, it's a really devastating read, which that was by design. And then I picked, when I was working on it, a poem or a song, whatever, and I put it before each chapter. But I still had, like 20 years worth of stuff. So I decided I would publish 3 books in a year. And so 6 months after that, I published Gangrenous Speeches, because Jehovah's Witnesses are told to avoid apostates' gangrenous speeches. And that was everything I had written. And then 6 months after that, I published my first work of fiction, which is an allegory for leaving a high control group. It's called Despicable, and it's a story about the Antichrist to a hateful God. It's basically someone realizes their God is pure evil, and even though they have more power, they still challenge them, right? But it also allowed me to really embrace, the horror movies and stories that I love so much. And
Stuff that you weren't allowed to watch growing up.
yeah, so
I wasn't supposed to.
and it also represented a step away from it, right? It's like, here's my trilogy. I call it the Apostasy Trilogy: Sedition Against Jehovah's Witnesses. But because I still wanted to write, and so I was involved with a crowd fund. The crazy thing is, I was just going to do that and kill myself, but it kept leading to all these beautiful healing experiences that I've had since. So I helped with a crowdfund for a documentary called Witness Underground. My friend Scott Holman, he's a filmmaker, and it's about a group of ex-Jehovah's Witness musicians. And because it was successful, he gave me an IMDb producer credit. So I got to tell my son, I'm a film producer. That was kind of neat. And then, I had an author event at a local bookstore. And then I flew to Boston last year, and I spoke at an ex-Jehovah's Witness convention. And I met all these amazing, great people, and, I was able to speak publicly about my father twice, on Friday and Sunday. And it was very cathartic and healing. I probably spent 20 to 30 hours working on that speech. And even while I was there, I was interviewed for a documentary about an ex-Jehovah's Witness from Spain that I don't know exactly when it's going to come out. I don't have, contact with them, but I wouldn't have been able to do that, if I hadn't have done that. And I published an ebook about finding motivation after desolation, called Zizu, Desolation Before Motivation. And then now I'm working on, works of fiction, because that's really what I always wanted to do. And in November of last year, I was promoted to management. I got a house to rent, and I've also reconnected with my friend from New Zealand. She flew here and spent 12 days with me, and then she's going to come back in April and spend almost a month. And yeah, it's just, it's been crazy. Really, in the past 5.5 years, I've accomplished more than anything before. And I'm free to love my son for whoever he becomes. We celebrate Halloween. We always dress up and go see a movie. And yeah, it's, there was, the early part of my life had a lot of intense agony, but I wouldn't change any of it. And I used to hear people think that, or say that, and kind of think they were, full of crap. But, yeah, it's just, it's really been a cathartic experience, and it's been empowering, I've been able to encourage other people to write, and they've done it, and then they've told me how happy and fulfilled they are. The sad thing is, a lot of people come out of the organization, at least in my opinion, and they're obsessed with bringing people out. But you don't even know who they'll become, right? I mean, I changed completely. And yeah, I don't know, pursuing what you want and just being fulfilled, I think that's kind of what life is about.
Absolutely. Pursuing what you want or what you believe in or something that's important to you, finding that purpose.
Yeah,
And
what you're passionate
yeah,
about. That's
yes.
the best. Like, even if people are into weird things, I mean, you know, what are you passionate about? What makes your face light up? That's what lights
Yeah,
me
we
up.
need weird stuff out there too. Everything can't just be black and white and gray.
Yeah,
Yeah, we need colors and vibrancy and people doing off the wall crazy stuff so that we can learn from 'em. Like if scientists never took chances, we would never find cures, and
yeah,
if athletes never push the limit, we would never see excellence or greatness and things, and race car drivers and so on and so on, and even just like I mean, to be honest, it goes all the way down to sometimes a dad working an extra 10 hours a day or 10 hours that week so he can get his son that birthday present,
yeah,
that's coming up or whatever it might be. But, you know, hours are piling on and you're tired or whatever and you got somebody to look forward to motivate you and kind of like to get some words of wisdom or words of encouragement or something like that. Like me growing up, it was kind of a free for all. I had my grandparents country music, whatever. My uncle was kind of like rock and roll. I was growing up listening to like the newer sound, the pop and the hip hop and everything. But yours was really structured and everything was maybe for a reason and it had to be this way and the way I grew up was different. I can't imagine not being able to dream or not to be able to like have goals and aspirations and things like that without feeling guilty about them.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you always felt guilt, which since leaving and researching cult tactics and logical fallacies and really untangling the mess in my head or whatever. Yeah, it's crazy because my son is 8 and he looks just like me when I was a boy. And the older he gets, the more my memory comes back because my memory is very fragmented. Um,
You see yourself in him.
and yeah, I mean, it's insane to me to think I would look at him and say, hey, you're going to give a talk. You're going to read from the Bible in front of people. And not only that, it's filled with insane words like Nebuchadnezzar. And if you mispronounce it, that's going to be displeasing to God. And you don't want to make God angry. That's psychotic. That's what I was told when I was 6. It is
Yeah.
beyond the pale. And it's crazy because just I've told people my life got worse for really like 40 years. People would say it'll get better. Well, I couldn't believe that because it never had. And just because I just said whatever, I'm going to do whatever I want and I want to write a book. And I had some people discourage me. I was told not to meet my friend from New Zealand. I was told not to write books. I was told not to write a horror story about the Antichrist. And no, what I tell people is enjoy your mediocrity. Leave me alone. You do what you want, but I'm not harming anybody. I'm just creating art. And because I just decided to lean into that, it's changed my life. I paid off all my debt too from working at this bar. Told not to do that. I don't, pay my bills with my writing. It's my passion, But I am more alive than I have ever been. And also, my son has been able to see me come up from living in a hovel to I found a really nice house to rent, and hopefully, he can read about my life when he's older, and he can know that the steamroller does not determine whether or not the object is destroyed. It's the object. And yeah, I mean, I guess I'm living like my father, what I believe in. I love art. I love how I would listen to songs by Metallica or, Nine Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson, and it would speak to me after my father's death. It felt like it was written for me. And those people, even though I've never met them, and I'm sure I never will, in many ways, that art kept me alive for decades, because it was all I.
Yeah, music's a powerful thing.
Yeah. And that's why I love art so much.
Poetry, music, same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, words are powerful.
definitely. And a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, that they get into theology and all that. And, I knew that my story was kind of extreme. I've learned it's even more extreme than I thought from some other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses when they've read it. But it's like, no, this could, potentially expose this group in a different way. You have people who are discussing theology and, the hypocrisy of the group. But I wanted to tell my story because I think it's compelling. And I think the brutality of it, I mean, in many ways, I just wrote for my son, because, like I said, I was just going to kill myself after it came out. Um, but then I found support from people I worked with. People helped me take promotional pictures.
That's good.
And I would even bring a contract and say, I need you to sign this so I can use this image in perpetuity and on my website. And they all signed it. Everyone was fine. I've had people take author pictures. I found support at this bar more than anywhere else. And, that was really transformative because I work with a lot of minorities and I was raised to be very homophobic and cruel and even, racially insensitive. And even talking about that, none of them held it against me. They all just said, well, that's okay. You didn't know better. And that was remarkable to me because all I ever heard was that I was garbage. When I was a child, I was told I was a good for nothing slave. And I can't imagine saying that to my child. It's just, it's crazy. So, yeah, it's just, it's crazy because I never thought things would improve. And now, like I said, with a promotion and a house and having real friends, and even meeting my friend from New Zealand, which was just this amazing, crazy. I met her when I was 17, and we met physically when I was 43. And when I reached out to her and said, hey, like some of the emo love poems I wrote for you are in my second book, I didn't think we'd even really speak again, but we speak every day. And, she had even memorized things I wrote for her when we were teenagers. So it's just been this really awesome connection. And yeah, it's just been this crazy experience. And I'm only 43, who knows? I could die tomorrow, but I could, live.
Or you could live to be 100.
Yeah. I never even thought I'd get to publish a book. And I've published.
Well, congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you.
And you've got more than one book. Like you got a lot of stuff you're working on right now.
Yes. So I wrote my son a children's book about critical thought and skepticism, titled "The Boy Who Loves a Monster," and it rhymes kind of like Dr. Seuss. But I'm currently working on illustrating it. It's just since November things have kind of been a whirlwind, and then I also am working on an ode for my friend from New Zealand. I call her my muse. But yeah, it's a horror romance titled 1111. And I'm also working on a horror story about kind of basically a man creates a religion and it's 24 logical fallacies why he's God. And I want to write about how he does that as a way of catharsis and dealing with coming out of a high control group, but then this movement forms around him and he finds himself the leader and he is initially compelled to care for them, but because they're so gullible, he really begins to despise them. And yeah, I just want to create, and like I said, I like telling dark stories. That's what I like. So it's just really great to write whatever I want. And people can love it, people can hate it, but it's out there.
Let me ask you this. So in your writing, which is more difficult, creating and writing a monster character or a romantic love interest character?
I don't honestly find either of them difficult. Even in my story about the Antichrist, he's punishing people who are abusing children. And now I was raised around extremely violent imagery, so it is excessively violent, but it's really kind of a commentary on the absence of boundaries. But he's also sweet to, he becomes a friend to a little girl. He teaches her how to cook. He teaches her about his favorite song. And truthfully, it's my one of my favorite recipes, and it's one of my favorite songs because I like to create the art. So really, that's kind of a message to my son hidden in that. I think I write. Yeah, I don't know. Writing's just always been something that's come very naturally. I do like to, I've written some very romantic things, but I've also written some very violent things, and I think that's just the duality of man.
Yeah, well, there's a thin line between love and hate.
Yes, definitely. I think they're pretty much the same emotion, just different
Yeah,
extremes. Because
right.
the opposite of love is apathy, right? So I like to create characters that maybe are doing bad things, but you understand why. I think if you can get the reader to kind of buy in, it can put them in a spot where they're like, wow, I'm like going along with this. And I just want to create things that challenge, and yeah, yeah, just whatever comes into my mind.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing that, and being creative and giving yourself a chance to get different characters out there. I mean, you're not putting yourself in a box and only doing one kind of book or novel or memoir or whatever. I mean, you're working on children's books. You got your memoirs, your trilogy. Did you write a book, Sisu?
Yes, Zizu. It's a Finnish term, and it means finding extreme determination, even if there's no hope of success. And
Desolation before motivation.
yes,
Like in your lowest moment of desolation, what was one thing that you actually kept a hold of that kept you going? Like in your lowest moment, what was one thing that you kept going back to? I think maybe you said it was your father or your son, probably different times in your life, I guess,
I I would say the lowest point of my life was when I crawled under a bridge to see where I could live there. Um, and in that moment, I did consider drinking again to escape my problem, like I had so many other times, because I wasn't taught coping skills or coping mechanisms. I was taught obedience. And I just,
doesn't that take all the humanity out of like, it's almost like you're like,
of life, it takes the
yeah,
humanity.
like you're like not robotic so much, but like you got this set of rules, and it's like you have to like feel this way, look this way, talk this way, do that, and then anything outside of that, you know, you're doing something wrong. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel the same way every day. I don't think the same way every day. Like thoughts come and go. You know how it is
Yeah.
going through, through life as a kid, as a youngster, going through all the stuff that kids go through and adolescence and all that stuff. I can't imagine what it would have been like for someone to cut off like all my creativity or all my, I didn't get into religion till later. Like, and I say, I don't mean to say religion, but I look at church different than I don't think every church is trying to be a high control group.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I think people can go to church and have a true relationship with God or their higher power. That's not for me to decide, but whatever for them. I think that they can go there and they can find peace, they can find salvation, they can find love, they can find joy, they can find whatever it is that they are looking for in those places. And I just when you start putting all those rules and regulations on it,
Yeah.
and turning it into like punishments and ostracizing and shunning and things like that, that changes everything.
Mhm.
It's no longer a relationship between like you and your higher power. It's almost like it's like you have to please a board of people
Oh,
rather than actually like a real like spiritual on a spiritual level.
oh, definitely. And I've talked to people who left and they went to other religions. I have my opinions about that. But like they, I went door to door trying to convert people. We would go preaching on Christmas Day, which was the worst. And I'm a child knocking on a door telling adults that they're disobeying God. I'm fine with not knowing. I don't even care, honestly. Like it's just for me it's like I just want to pursue the things and the people that I love. It took so much from me, and I really didn't expect to ever really have a chance at a real life. Um, like I said, I thought, well, I'll just write this book, and then I can wrap things up. And then it's like, there's just been so much gravy after that. So many great experiences. And yeah,
So much more than you expected.
yeah, all because at my lowest point, I said, I don't care what anyone thinks. I remember at one point, I told someone I was going to publish a book. I said, I don't know how, but I'm going to make it happen. And they said, "Oh, it'll only fix so much," because people tend to assume because I write books, like I'm seeking money, and it's like, no, no, no. This is how I change myself. I didn't know how it would change me, but I knew that it would. And since I was a child, or since I started writing, people sometimes they'd find my. I remember someone found my writing, and they said, "This is pure talent," and they said, I can't believe you're suicidal. And of course, and I never really thought about that until years later. And, I mean, I have been able to make a little money selling, I've sold paintings and all that, but I just always loved art. So it's just really healing and awesome to connect with that. And, and I've been pushing every day for years. I've been interviewed several times, but this is the first time someone has interviewed me who either isn't, a former Jehovah's Witness or hasn't left, a similar type of high control group. So it's just been about, I mean, hell, I've tried to get on Joe Rogan 2 or 3 times. I've tried to get on Theo Vaughn. I've sent letters to Stephen Colbert. Whether or not something happens doesn't matter. I love the saying by Marcus Aurelius: "What stands in the way becomes the way." And for
Well, this is Joe Rogan to somebody, and I'm somebody's Theo Vaughn.
yeah,
So this is going to get out there to somebody, and somebody's going to see it, and I might not be, the real Joe Rogan or the real Theo,
hey, you're you.
but hey, yeah, and your message still gets out there, and somebody's going to see it, and hey, maybe one of these days I will be on a bigger platform,
Hell yeah,
and
you keep pushing. Like that's what's great is just people being themselves. And especially when you can have a discussion with someone, you might have different viewpoints, but you can still be civil and grow. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's just, yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. It's just a lot. My life has, I guess, it's been insane. I mean, it's only what I know. Sometimes I tell a story and I think it's funny, and then people are like, "Wow, that's really traumatic," because it really is like just coming out of the Matrix. That was all I knew, and
yeah, and you're probably still processing some of it.
oh, definitely. Since I moved in here and got promoted, it's like, wait a minute, like I don't really have any major problems. And it's extremely uncomfortable. And one of the things I talk about for ex-cult members is you're conditioned to be abused. You're conditioned for disrespect. Lean into what is uncomfortable, because if it's comfortable, it's not good for you. You can't leave a dysfunctional environment like that functional. you haven't fully developed because you're circumscribed and contrived by the environment. And it doesn't always make me the most popular, but I don't care. um, that's how my father was. It's just passed genetically. And it's like it's just great that I guess I just wanted to write that book for my son, and then it just connected me with people, and it really changed my life. Art saved my life multiple times. And yeah.
And it was always there inside of you the whole time. You just didn't have an opportunity to let it out.
Definitely. The I have a drawing I made, which my ex-wife kept some of my art after, well, all of it after our divorce, and I recently got it back when I moved, so that's been cool to have it again. But the summer I turned 30, two men I grew up with killed themselves because they weren't happy in the truth, and they thought they deserved to die. And I tried it, a lot. So for me, it's like I almost feel like there's an obligation, right, to talk about the brutal, cruel shunning, and yeah, I just really appreciate you having me on to speak to me and let me share my story.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and joining us and just sharing your story and your experiences with us. It's been nice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Do you have anything you want to shout out, or anything you want to plug? Any hotlines, any crisis hotlines, or suicide hotlines?
Yeah, so
People you're associated.
if I always encourage people to reach out to me. Maybe they're interested in collaborating, or just I like talking to people because you never know what can lead from that. I direct people to my website, which is micahallonlosh.com. It has links to I am active on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. I am banned on Twitter, and I don't have TikTok anymore because some of their new rules allowed them to profit and off of your creativity. But yeah, I have a blog on there, and I have links to my book. But on the homepage, I also have like freedom from religion organization and a suicide number and some other contacts. And yeah, it's okay to not know. It's okay to come out of that environment and suffer. A lot of people still keep the toxicity that group instilled, and people can feel like they need to be performative and say everything's okay. It doesn't have to be okay, and it's okay to be angry. Anger is a gift, and anger is a stage of grief. So if anybody has left that environment and they're telling you not to be angry, that's not a person you should really take seriously. Process it, because I didn't process my father's death until I was homeless in a halfway house. And I think that's by design, because if you never grieve, it's likely you'll never leave.
Yeah, they say grief is love with no place to go.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to go through it because it's extremely painful.
Yeah, you do. You have to work it out one way or another, or it'll always revisit you over and over throughout your life until you figure it out.
Yeah. And coming out of that group is a death. It's a massive death.
Oh, I can imagine. It's like most of your identity. It's almost like the whole person that you were. There's only
Yeah.
a small amount of you that's not wrapped up in everything that you know, everything that you knew, everything that you were. And then, like you said, it's kind of like a death and then a new person, a new personality, your thoughts, everything, the things that you're interested in now. I mean, I don't know all the details and stuff of your younger years as Jehovah Witness, and I don't actually know any Jehovah Witness. When I was young, I knew one, and the only thing really I knew is that he just didn't celebrate holidays and birthdays and stuff. And then my family was like, just don't ask questions, just
Well,
leave it alone or whatever.
yeah,
And which is kind of weird because like most Christians is like witness and get out there and do this and do that. But I have seen some Jehovah Witness, the Watchtower, I think it's called. They have a book or a brochure or something that they sent to the house.
Yeah.
But that was pretty much it. Like they never tried to push any of their beliefs or anything on. Well, I was young, so I don't think that they talked to my parents or anything. But for people that are struggling, for young families, for you like young men and women that are like 20 years old and having kids, maybe that don't have the best family structure, people that's struggling with drug addiction or abuse or suicidal thoughts, like they go through phases in their life where they're not always the strongest
Mhm.
emotionally and intellectually, even, because whether emotions are not supposed to control your intellect, your thoughts and everything.
Yeah.
But we all know they do because the way we feel
Yeah.
in a certain day is definitely kind of the direction where our thoughts and stuff go. But I don't want to. You spent your whole life in this almost like an institution,
Yeah.
I guess is what it's called, an institution. And then you get out. Is there ever a chance on you to ever look for a higher power again?
In many ways, I've crossed the Rubicon. I mean, it would have been unthinkable if you would have told me that I would be an ex Jehovah's Witness. I would have told you you were out of your mind. You were an idiot. It would have been unthinkable that I would be an apostate author. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that I am actively fighting God. So I don't know. But what what I can tell you is, I know some people that say they feel very fulfilled by, they left Jehovah's Witnesses and became Catholic or Pentecostal or, I've Buddhist. I've talked to a lot of different people. Um, for me, what is fulfilling for me and meaningful is art and authenticity. I don't see myself ever accepting um, something without evidence because I had really profound spiritual experiences. I felt God moving in my life, and I considered denying my son blood. I believed wholeheartedly. So, if it can't be demonstrated, it's just I don't think it's something that I would ever personally um, consider. And what I also tell people is if God is real and he knows me and one day I stand before him, I would just say, I think I would ask him, well, if you know how, what I've gone through and who I am, I think you would know what I would need in order to have faith in you. And if that means I have to be punished, then I accept that. I personally have I've experienced, some pretty extreme things, and I just really can't imagine that. But, I don't know the future either.
Well, regardless of which way that your religious journey goes, I just hope that you have, peace of mind and peace in your heart, and that you and your son live and grow and prosper and have joy and happiness, for the rest of your life because you deserve it. Everybody deserves happiness
Yeah.
and love and family, and if you can give him that without fear, and I never was one for fear to be my
Yeah.
driving motivator. My number one factor. It just seems artificial or whatever. But
It seems like it.
love and caring and importance and passion and things like that. Those are the things I like to get behind
Yeah.
and support.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I tell, like, I've learned how to live in the moment. And, I've gone to therapy. I do take, it's not a controlled medication, it's an antihistamine, but, I take that for anxiety, and I take a small amount of an antidepressant, and my mental health is the best it's ever been. I have people who are good to me, who I can rely on, who are genuine friends, and even if I died in 5 seconds, I would die happy. I would die fulfilled because I have been tested in my life, and I know exactly who I am. Leave me to die homeless with 35K in debt, and I will pay it off. I will eat the elephant over years, and I will work every day to be a bigger part of my son's life, and I will be authentic. Consequences be damned. So, yeah, I don't ever want to evoke pity from people, or because some people read my memoir and they say, "Oh, it's so bad, it's so bleak," but it's my origin story, So, and sometimes I read it and I think, God, this crazy bastard went through hell, and then I remember it's me.
Right. But the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, like,
It's not necessarily where you're coming from, it's where you're going.
yeah, and even if my stuff is online, I've written books, and as long as people leave extra or Jehovah's Witnesses, people will stumble across them, and that's the immortality that Watchtower promised me. Writing books and showing my son to pursue what you want. My son is very creative. He's told me he wants to make a movie when he's older. Well, I can say, hey, I have multiple friends who've made movies. I can ask them for advice. I can show you this stuff. So
And those are things that you might not have had if you would not have wrote the book.
definitely. And I just tried. I had no expectation of even selling one copy. I just thought, what if I try? What if I tried every day? Sometimes I'll send out 100 messages to people trying to get interviewed or a review of my book because I put in the work. And it just, it can lead to unexpected things. And most important of all is I broke the cycle of abuse. My son doesn't have to grow up in a cult. And, it just, everything else is just extra. It's just, yeah, it's just it's an amazing time, man. Like, because like every once in a while, when I finish a book, I like to smoke a cigar. I know a man who was shunned for 20 years for smoking, and he got reinstated, and he died like 6 months later. So
Wow.
I,
I'm actually trying to clean up my act and quit smoking on camera myself.
but I would wager I enjoy that cigar more than just about anybody I know. Because every inhale is just freedom, and it's exhilarating. To be myself, and to just that authenticity when you're denied it for so long. Yeah, Micah Losh is my slave name because like I said, I was told I was a good for nothing slave, and so just yeah, it's great, man. It really is wonderful, and I never would have thought I would ever say that, and I don't think you need to suffer to appreciate things, but when you have suffered immeasurably, like I don't
You
take
appreciate it a little more.
Oh, I don't take a thing for granted. Even I didn't come out of a cult and have a good life. I was left to be homeless and face judgment and all kinds of hell for years. Even I lived in a place with common kitchens where people were shoving food down the bathtub. It was disgusting. So I didn't cook. I just lived out off of DoorDash and out of gas stations. And now I can cook. I can season my food, and yeah, I can make coffee. It's just, fine.
Without the fear of every decision you make and being something that you have to feel guilty for. I mean, I can just imagine like everything you're doing, you have to worry like I'm going to hell or
Yeah,
I'm going to, this one's not going to like it. They're not going to like it. I'm doing
yeah,
something wrong or,
yeah. And
like,
now, I can decorate my home how I want. I had like close to $8,000 saved for, over a year. And then when I finally was able to move, I got to decorate everything with brand new stuff and like really create a healing, happy place. Because I never lived in a place I liked, you know. Everything, propaganda was every
It's
day.
always somebody else's place.
Yeah, well, and there was propaganda and fear in my childhood home, and then I was in this miserable marriage, and then jail and homeless and these disgusting halfway houses, and now I lucked into this really beautiful place. Also, uh, a friend of mine, his landlord lives next door, and the only reason I got it is years ago he messaged me and said, "Hey, I don't think we'd agree on much from politics to religion, but I like your style and I'd like to get coffee." And I've received death threats online, several times. But I was like, well, maybe this guy wants to attack me, but maybe something good will come from it. And years later, he helped me, because I've been locked up. I was having trouble. I was looking at disgusting, horrible places, and I got this really nice place. So it's just
Well, that's
effort.
awesome.
Just put in the effort, and who knows what might happen. Regardless,
People are a lot more likely to help you if you're helping yourself.
definitely. And yeah, I just never really put in effort or tried. And then getting promoted, I work in a huge bar. I have the keys to like $1 million building. you know, and it's like, and I'm trusted to do that. And when you've been nothing your whole life, I'm not saying, oh, I'm a floor manager at a bar, aren't I awesome? But just coming out of that environment and being trusted and being respected, and yeah, it's an amazing thing, because so many people I know that have left still suffer. They talk about it, or they kill themselves because it's so bad when you come out. But I would do anything for my son. I will challenge a cult. I will live in a disgusting hellhole. I will walk everywhere, and my feet bled all the time because originally I was walking 45 minutes to work, walking on concrete all day, and walking back. I paid off all that debt. I improved my credit. I have multiple credit cards. Even when I have emergencies, I can handle that. And yeah, for that boy, my father. My father, he died because he thought he was doing the right thing. And I'm just really grateful that I didn't kill myself because I thought it was the right thing, because I was told my son didn't even know I wasn't around. And it wasn't until years later that I could ask him, and he told me, no, he missed me, and like, yeah, I, you know, I just, I'd do anything for him.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that you're able to do that now and to do what you want to do with him and to share your passions with him and your thoughts, your creative side, and allow him to be creative and explore, the world in his own way, in his own right and time and everything. Um, and I commend you. And I plan on getting a copy of your book. You said I could get it on Amazon or Walmart. Is that what you said?
Well, I think it's online, multiple places, but like I said, you can go on Amazon. There's a link on my website to all my books. You can also Google Micah Losh or mentally diseased, and it'll come up.
Okay. Michael, we're going to let you get out of here. Is there anything that you would like to say before you go? If there's someone out there that's listening right now, someone that feels stagnated, kind of like you did for decades, what is the first forbidden thing that you would tell them to do today to start their journey?
I would say, if you don't know what you're passionate about, if you don't know what like makes life exciting, I hope you can take the time to really find that out. Um, because I don't. I write for multiple reasons, but the main reason is I love words. Um, and it's such a fulfilling thing to have done the thing that you love most. And we live in a time when you can do it with such ease. So many things online. You can connect with people. Yeah. So nobody gets out alive. So why not do the coolest thing you can think of? Because for me, writing, I can't sing. I wanted to be in a rock band, but I started writing. So yeah, man,
Right.
just wake up.
For some guys, it might be singing. For some guys, it might be shooting 3-pointers.
Yeah,
For you, it's writing.
yeah. I mean,
For some guys, it might be a bow, shooting deer or elk or bear or
yeah,
hunting. Fishing. There's things for everybody out there to get involved in and try to find something to do and find something to be passionate about.
definitely. And just living that way, as long as you're not hurting others, you know, in my experience, is the best way to live. And I did not write my memoir. I'll tell you this: if you plan on reading, I did not write it to be flattering. I wrote it to be authentic and to talk about mistakes and things I said that were terrible and did because of propaganda and blind faith. But it doesn't define you. If people want to judge me on my mistakes, that's fine. I accept it. But I think that means they should be judged on their mistakes, as well. And it's just, yeah, life can change. I know better than probably a lot that, it can feel like nothing will ever change. But just maybe if you change one thing, it'll change everything.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
I'm glad to meet you, Micah. I hope we stay in touch. I like to write and I like poetry myself. Anytime you want to send something my way, check it out, to read or anything, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me. And it was nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you as well. Maybe you'll have to come back and see us sometime.
All right. Maybe.
All right. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Point M.